Thank you. One, I'd like to say something about Senator Scott. I know how hard he's worked on this, and this has not been an easy enterprise for Tim. He's a conservative Republican who happens to be African American, and he's decided to take the lead on something that's very important to the country. And he has experiences that I don't. He has been stopped multiple times on Capitol Hill. I've never been stopped. And one year he was stopped 7 times for lane changes. The point is that Tim believes, and every African-American male I've talked to in the last couple of weeks is told early on, if you're stopped by the cops, watch what you do, keep your hands on the wheel, don't go for the dash, because it can end badly. I don't know how that happened, but it's real. And for us not to realize that would be a huge mistake. So let me be on record saying, I understand that if you're an African-American male, your experience with the police is different than mine, and it's unacceptable, and it needs to stop. So how do you stop it? You bring about change. So what kind of change are we looking for? Our Democratic friends have a list of changes. I think it's justice and policing. The House is marking it up. Here's what I would say to my Democratic colleagues. Stop lecturing me. You had 8 years under President Obama to do the things in the Justice and Policing Act, and 90% of it you never brought up. I'm not saying we're blameless, but there has not been this sense of urgency to deal with these problems institutionally like there is today. Why? Because Mr. Floyd and a few other things all happening together. Tim said in 2016 we had our chance. These episodes come and they go. The question for the country is, will anything ever change? The only way it's going to change is to find common ground. So the proposal that Senator Scott has collected along with other colleagues has bipartisan support. But if it's not enough, I'm willing to listen regarding doing more. Senator Sass was with me yesterday. We had a 5-hour hearing. And I learned a lot. I learned that a police department looking like the community is important, Senator Lankford, but more importantly is that you live where you police. I asked the gentleman from New Jersey, what's more important, race or community attachment? And he said community attachment. You're less likely to hurt somebody in a community you feel a part of. Now, having said that, we need more African American police personnel. We need more women. Apparently, women do the job a lot better than men. I haven't heard one person come forward and say I had a bad experience with a policewoman. So more women would be helpful. But the main thing is we need people from the community being in charge of policing that community with a system that's more accountable. So Cory Booker and I worked together on a lot of things. Great guy. Tim and Cory are good friends, and I admire the heck out of Tim Scott. I'm not going to take any more time. He's one of the most decent people I ever met, and we're lucky in South Carolina to have him, and I think the country's lucky. So the bottom line is Cory said 2 things in the hearing, Ben. There's 2 issues that have to be addressed or everything else doesn't matter. 242 and qualified immunity. I wrote them down. For those who are not conversant in 242 or qualified immunity, there's nothing wrong with you. This is a very archaic area of the law. Qualified immunity is a judicial doctrine that's developed over time that relates to the 1983 Civil Rights Statute that allows people to sue governmental entities for abuse of force, for excessive force. There's nothing in the statute about an objective standard where a reasonably prudent police officer in the same circumstances acted accordingly. There's nothing about good faith. So Justice Thomas is a pretty conservative guy. He wanted to revisit qualified immunity. I don't know how he would substantively come out on the issue, but in his dissent denying certiorari of the concept, he explained how this judicial concept has exploded beyond every attachment to common law analysis. This is Clarence Thomas. And if you presented to me qualified immunity in its current form as a legislative proposal, I would vote hell no. Police officers need not worry about losing their house or being sued if they act in good faith in performing duties that are hard on any good day. But when police departments, time and time again, fail to do the things necessary to instill good policing, I think they should be subject and accountable like any other business. So there is common ground here. Not one Democrat has suggested to me to make the individual officer civilly liable under 1983. But I've had Democrats suggest to me that the standard has become almost absolute immunity. And the president, presiding officers run all kinds of businesses. Being in the policing business is not your normal business. There needs to be a filter when it comes to lawsuits. It can't be about outcome. But it is now time, in my view, to look at the development of the qualified immunity doctrine as it relates to the 1983 underlying statute and see if we can make it better, not gut it. To my Democratic friends, if you want to eliminate qualified immunity, it would be a very short conversation. If you want to reform it so that municipalities and agencies and organizations running police department will have some protection but not absolute immunity, let's talk. Maybe we can get there. If it's that important, let's at least try. That's what the legislative process is all about. 242. It allows the federal government to bring charges against an individual for denying another American their constitutional rights. This is about policing, but not exclusive to policing. The presiding officer's from Georgia, I'm from South Carolina. There was a time in the South where juries would nullify all the evidence in front of them because the victim was a black man and the perpetrator was white. And you could present a mountain of evidence and you'd get an acquittal in like 15 minutes. So we came up with a concept to allow the federal government to intervene in cases like that and hold somebody liable for violating the constitutional rights of another American under color of law. The standard to prosecute is willful. You got to prove that the police officer willfully understood the constitutional right and violated it. My friends on the other side want to lower the standard to reckless. And here's what I would say. This is not 1965. Mr. Floyd is going to be prosecuted. So while it's important to talk about 242, most states where these events have occurred have acted responsibly. We don't need the federal government sitting in judgment of every cop in the country. What we do need is a system of accountability, and I'll talk to you about 242, but I think that is not the issue. What's the issue? Is that police departments who are immune from liability when they engage in abusive conduct over and over are unlikely to change until that changes. You can throw all the money you want to it, training and improving best business practices, and they'll gladly accept your money, and if they don't do it right, they don't get the money. We'll add one thing to the mix. And oh, by the way, if you shoot a dog and you wind up killing a kid, your police officer shouldn't shot the dog anyway in a fashion to kill the kid right by the dog. You're going to wind up having your ass in court. That will change things. I've been a lawyer. I know how people feel about this. If you're exposed in terms of your conduct being subject to a review by a court and a jury, you're all of a sudden going to think differently. Now, don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I am not for abolishing qualified immunity. I am for revisiting the concept because I think it's grown too much from judicially created fiat. It's time for the legislative body for us to speak as to what we would like to have happen to the statute that we created, that now has a component to it that was never envisioned when it was originally passed. That's what Clarence Thomas is telling us as a nation we need to do. So to my friends on the other side, if it's about qualified immunity, let's talk. If it's about 242, let's talk. If it's about keeping this issue alive, don't waste my time. We've all had plenty of time around here to do better. Now we got a chance to actually do some good. The only way we're going to do some good is talk, and the only way you get a law passed is to engage in debate. And if you don't want to debate the topic, you don't want to have amendments about the topic, that tells me all I need to know about where you're coming from. I yield to my friend from Nebraska.